Commission on recycling markets and curbside recycling. I'm Heidi Sanborn, the chair, and we will go ahead and get started. We've got a very full agenda today. Want to remind everybody that we do take public comments through the portal at calrecycle.ca.gov under the Recycling Commission webpage, and they can be up to 150 words. If you care to email longer comments or give us a letter or something else you'd like us to share on the Google Documents, you can go ahead and email that to the email provided on the website. So with that, this is our 21st meeting, believe it or not, since June of last year. And we will go ahead and call the meeting to order and do a roll call and establishment of a quorum. And I will just call your names down just to make sure I can hear everybody. I think we have Commissioner John Bouchard. Is he here? I don't think so. Okay. So we're missing Mr. Bouchard. Commissioner Cadena?
I'm here.
Great, thank you. And Commissioner Davis?
Yes, sure.
Good morning, Commissioner Dell.
Present.
Thank you. Commissioner Dunleavy?
Good morning, here.
Good morning. Commissioner Ferrante? Is she on? Guess we're missing Ferrante, Bouchard. All right, and Commissioner Kalpikoff?
Present.
Great, and Commissioner Lapis? Missing Commissioner Lapis. Okay, so we're missing 3. Commissioner Medrano, I think, he let me know he will be joining us at 9:30. He had something come up. Commissioner Osagura?
Good morning.
Good morning. Commissioner, myself, Heidi Sanborn. Commissioner Schneider?
Good morning.
Good morning. Commissioner Sky?
Good morning, I'm here.
Great. Good morning. And Commissioner Toyota?
Good morning.
And Vice Chair Vallier? Is the Vice Chair on? I think I see him, but he's not unmuted. So we'll go back to him because he is logged in. And then Commissioner Ward. I can't hear you.
Yes, and Mr. Bouchard has joined us also.
Oh, great. Thank you. So Bouchard has joined us. Medrano's going to join at 9:30. So we're missing Ferrante and Lapis. We're also missing, well, not missing, I'll explain in a minute. Eric Potashner is not going to be joining us today, and we'll have Zoe explain why. And then Commissioner Vallier. Is he back? I know he's logged in. He probably just stepped away from his desk for a minute. So we'll count him as in because he has logged in. So we're missing 2 of our commissioners. So we do have a quorum. And at this point, I would like to turn it over. And I see Nick Lapis, Commissioner Lapis has just arrived. So actually we're down to just Commissioner Ferrante is missing and Medrano who will be joining us. So Zoe, if you're available, could you please explain why Commissioner Potashner is not joining us today? We did receive an email from Commissioner, I should say now ex-Commissioner, unfortunately, Potashner yesterday that he has willingly resigned his position because CalRecycle has made a decision on, this is the first time we've had a change in commissioners or a commissioner that had a change in position, and they had to think about it. So, Zoe, if you want to go ahead and explain the situation, that'd be great.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. So as Heidi just stated, a couple of weeks ago, Commissioner Potashner submitted a notice to both CalRecycle and Chair Sanborn that he was changing employment and would no longer be with Recology. So after careful consideration, CalRecycle had a conversation with Commissioner Potashner yesterday where he agreed to resign from the commission. CalRecycle intends to make an appointment to fill Commissioner Potashner's vacant seat. We'll provide an update when we have more information to share on that. And just quickly, I want to say that CalRecycle would like to thank Commissioner Potashner for his contributions to the commission, including him serving as the chair of the Organics Committee. We realize that he took on quite a bit, and we're very grateful for all that he did.
Thank you very much. And I also want to thank Eric. He did a fantastic job and put in a lot of work, and we really sincerely appreciate his participation in the commission and all the work he contributed. So is there anybody that would like to speak to that or have any questions for Zoe before we move on?
Just those of you who are on the Organics Committee, I encourage you to start thinking about the vacant chair position. As vice chair, I'll fill the role as best I can, but I do feel a little, very much like I need additional support.
Can I ask, what is the process for appointing a new member? Are you asking for applications, or are you going through previous applicants?
Nick, thanks for that question. Since this is the first time we're doing this, we're reviewing processes, and I will get back to this group when we have a determination on that.
Well, thank you.
Okay. And I am not seeing any raised hands, and I'm actually wondering if, because I know this format has changed, it looks like it's going to be in the chat. Okay. Commissioner Donlevy, did you wish to say anything?
Yes, thank you. As far as clarification, the applications were by individuals, and Mr. Potashner was highly experienced in the field, and it sounds like he was transitioning to another company that is in the realm of what we're talking about. So is it the company that he's representing, or the industry that he's representing, or is it the individual ability? Because it seems like he still would have added value to be on the commission, even though he switched companies.
Thanks, Jeff, for that question. And yeah, his change in employment was the factor that we weighed when we thought about making this decision.
Okay, so
it was that we had appointed him as a member of Recology, and since he was leaving Recology, that was the impetus for making the decision.
Okay, so then the criteria for the eligibility for a future applicant would be to fill a position representing a similar industry than Recology.
Yeah, we're reviewing that process, and I'll get back to this group with the process moving forward.
Okay.
Very good. Well, thank you very much, Zoe, for letting us know. I'm very sorry to lose Eric for just a lot of reasons. He was really great to work with. But hopefully we'll see him around in his new position at Schnitzer Steel. So, okay, then we'll go ahead and move on from agenda item 1. We do have a quorum. And did we add Commissioner Ferrante? Has she joined us? She's still missing. She's still missing. If somebody knows her, could text her, that would be fantastic. And see if she's going to be joining us. Okay, so we'll move on to agenda item number 2, which is review and potential approval of the meeting notes from our last meeting. And I just noticed on the agenda, I think it said from March 3rd, but it should have been April 3rd on the agenda. Would anybody like to make a motion or make any edits to the meeting minutes?
I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
Thank you. All commissioners can give a thumbs up if you're okay with that. Otherwise, I have to do a 17-member roll call of 16. Thank you very much. If there's anybody who's not okay with that, please speak up now. Okay, so these are approved. Thank you very much. If everyone can mute yourself when you're not speaking, that would be fantastic. Thank you. So we will now move on to agenda item number 3, which is the public comment review for items not on the agenda. There was one email with a couple of attachments from Direct Pack that I went ahead and uploaded the attachments from Green Waste and Athens Disposal. It's regarding, again, that recycling, what qualifies as recycling. So you can all see those comments. And Are there any other comments to CalRecycle staff, Ben, if you're listening, that came in, let's say in the last 24 hours to make sure everybody has seen them?
Yes, there are two. There's one from Evan Edgar that says, status of the detailed tip fee reform with earmarked spending and support to add it to a recommendation in the July report.
Tip fee.
Okay, so he's asking for it to be added, that tip fee reform to be added to the report for July?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And the other comment?
The other comment that's not on the agenda is from Heather Odell. It says, Fibershed is a California nonprofit that develops regionally based natural fiber and textile systems, representing a network of over 180 fiber producers and processors in California. As a sponsor of the California Product Stewardship Council, we're working together to create meaningful change, including contribution to CPSC's upcoming textile legislation report this year. We support CSPC's proposed hospitality textiles policy as a step forward for the textile industry. It presents achievable first steps towards systematically reducing textile waste, promotes regional resilience in natural systems, will be helpful to the industries involved, and already has established leaders in this space. Knowing we need more comprehensive change, Fibershed thanks CPSC for leading the textiles legislation report to highlight a holistic perspective on potential solutions and details for the legislature. And we thank the Statewide Recycling Commission for considering this policy proposal as an easy measure to move the needle.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Textiles are certainly a big issue and up and coming, and I believe that's been taken up in the Market Development Committee. Is that correct, Chair Davis?
Yes, we heard the initial proposal and submitted comments, and we have a revised proposal for review next week.
Very good. Thank you for that update. Appreciate it. Okay, are there any other public comments at this point?
That's for everything not on the agenda.
It's not on the agenda. Very good. Okay. Thank you very much. We'll go ahead then and move on to agenda item number 4, which is the report progress. And this is where Commissioner Ward is really the workhorse and I'm the editor. So I'd like to turn it over to Commissioner Ward, who's been so helpful in getting us moving on the reports and helping get the last report done. But I do want to remind everybody, we literally have only 2 months left to finish the report due July 1st, unless we add more meetings, which I think everybody would probably vote against. So I'll turn it over now to Commissioner Ward.
Right. Well, thank you, Chair Sanborn. So our intent is at the next meeting to have another working document that's on the Google Drive that y'all can look at and comment on and add to. And that the general guided concept is we're adding on to the report that we produced in January.
Mr. Schneider, can you please mute yourself? Thank you.
So one of the things that's before you today is the introductory section on waste prevention. And honestly, I was challenged to try to make this as brief as possible. And if you take a look at it, the main thing that I very much welcome input on is the general categories of waste prevention businesses. It's kind of hard to draw a firm line, and I have yet to encounter a very well-developed trade association network to help refine these categories. But of course, the ways that we break up these different groups very much then dictates how we develop programs for those groups. So I just think that breaking them out is a very important task at this point, and I welcome your input. So that's sort of the introduction to the waste prevention section.
We want to pull up the language, Commissioner Ward, so that people can see it.
I'd be happy to share my screen if that's possible. Let's see.
I think it's easier if everybody can see it. It wasn't that long.
Okay. So there it is. Let's see. Do I need to up the Zoom so that you all can see that better? How's that?
Much better. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it starts with an introduction. No need to read this because you'll have a chance to do that yourself, but essentially it says that we've got this 75% diversion goal, and waste prevention is the top of the hierarchy. And specifically, it references the circular, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation principles of a circular economy, meaning that transitioning to renewable energy sources, the circular model builds the economic, natural, and social capital based on three principles: designing out waste and pollution, keeping products and materials in use, and regenerating natural systems. So keeping those materials, products in use really requires that there be businesses to do so. And many of those businesses already exist, but they are not at this point considered part of our recovery infrastructure. So these are the categories I was talking about. Some of those are already have specific legislation targeting them, such as SB 1383 and food rescue. But we've got composting, community on-site and backyard composting. We've got design to reduce waste in all its many forms, everything from LEED architecture to xeriscaping to material substitution for toxics reduction. We've got thrift stores and the consignment, resale, and even antique shops, all keeping value of furniture and other goods that they manage, including textiles. We've got the larger category of vehicle, repair, restoration, salvage. You've also got small engine repair in there, and then you've also got heavy industrial equipment that tends to have an overlap with metals and salvage. We've got building materials, including deconstruction, salvage, and resale of those, and then facilities to resell those materials, such as the Habitat for Humanity restores. Computer and electronics, that includes repair, salvage, and resale, such as promoted by the Fix clinics. We've got transport products, specifically reusable transport packaging that can reduce waste in this fashion. Reusable and refillable packaging, such as the Loop model, and outreach and education related to waste prevention and reuse. So those are the general categories that we have, and part of the challenge is trying to make those comprehensive enough and inclusive enough, and yet not too many categories. I think I can stop sharing. I don't know how to do that.
Or you can keep sharing in case anybody has any comments or questions. I think what we were trying to do with this language is just kind of set up that, source reduction is first and reuse is first. And there's a lot of existing businesses that are in the reuse business that are not getting support from the waste system. And if we truly believe in source reduction and waste prevention, why aren't we helping food rescue and Fix-It clinics and others with the funds that we use for waste management? A lot of those organizations rely on volunteers and are scraping by and are in trouble, and we've even lost quite a few. Goodwills are one of them, to close for a while, especially during COVID. So just something to think about and discuss as a commission. I think Commissioner Sky, you're next, and then Commissioner Lapis.
Mainly, I want to say I think this is a great draft. I hope that we can incorporate it into the working draft of the report. The only addition I would have is that there's a lot of groups now online that are called Buy Nothing groups that promote this idea of sharing things that somebody doesn't need, but other people can avoid buying new. So if we can incorporate that. Great work.
Yeah, I think, would that be in the outreach and education? Because I didn't include online networks. There's FreeCycle, there's a number of them, but absolutely they should be.
Yeah.
Great. And then Commissioner Lapis.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Ted for taking this on, and I know that we did include government support for food rescue as part of the edible food recommendation, but I don't think we've talked about that for the other forms of reuse, so great to see that.
Exactly, yeah, we did get that one in there, but the others were not addressed, so we can restate that in the language in the report that we did get in the original report, one recommendation on this, but not any more than that. Commissioner Davis?
Yeah, with two thoughts, I guess. I wonder about the inclusion of vehicles, since, auto bodies are specifically not a part of the municipal stream for for CalRecycle purposes, but I'm trying to get my mind around that one. That's I'm not sure it needs government support. But then I'd suggest looking at the REFED's recent report. I think it was just published either this week or last week. It has a number of food waste prevention items besides recovering edible food. And a lot of that has to do with inventory control and purchasing, addressing the whole supply chain. So, maybe
You said that was REFED?
REFED, R-E-F-E-D.
Okay.
National group focused on. I can send you a link to it.
Great.
It's more than there's more than food rescue on that.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
I'll add two things to that, and I think that's a good question, John, about, autos. Do they need support? And I can tell you that in Europe, one of the first products that was put under an EPR system was automobiles, because they're considered the most toxic product with all the fluids and other materials. And I know BMW and Mercedes-Benz and others have really designed for the recyclability of the cars because of that EPR standards. I just want to make everybody aware of that if you weren't already. But also the other thing that we are dealing with cars in this state is there's a big debate right now between the auto shredders and DTSC on oversight and on some of the issues that what's hazardous, and if the DTSC proposal, as far last I heard, if it is implemented, the industry itself is saying they couldn't stay in California, or they'd have to get off of their properties. And that could dramatically impact our ability in the state to recycle automobiles, as we have just assumed they're all handled at this point. But that's something for us all to watch because I've heard from that industry, they're very, very concerned about this. So in fact, I believe they've even sued. So just an FYI. And then Commissioner Schneider.
Thank you.
Commissioner Sanborn, just an update on that lawsuits for folks to read. I think there was a termination last week on that suit, so folks might want to read into that.
Do you know what the answer was?
I haven't read it, so I wouldn't want to make an opinion of what it says, but
yeah,
I think
so we'll just look into that.
It came down last week.
Thank you. Thanks for letting us know.
Okay,
sorry.
Commissioner Ward, I'm sorry, I don't have the document up. Did we include rental operations, tool rental, tool libraries, and back to the cars? One of the things that came out of COVID from a local government perspective is if you've got people picking up food and delivering it, then you need to redesign your streets to have a drop-off and pickup area. So if we've got people not buying their own cars and relying on, say, an Uber or a Lyft, you have to have more pickup and drop-off areas. So government support may not be just money to Uber and Lyft, which I am not advocating for, but it can be in the design of your streetscapes. If you've got an old person, you can't drop them off 2 blocks from the grocery store and expect them to use a ride-sharing operation. So there are tweaks in government you have to make.
That's a very interesting point. So how to support rideshare as a way of getting auto reuse?
Well, I do think that's part of the larger design questions, and once you get into design, everything's on the table.
Clearly not our highest problem at this point, but that's a very interesting point.
But it is something governments are dealing with as COVID really brought it to the forefront. How do we feed our people?
Yep. And I think
Well, and I'll just to plant seeds with the commission. The example I always think of are libraries and drinking fountains. And these are essentially public institutions for community reuse and resource efficiency. And while people don't think of design of your drinking fountain infrastructure as a way to reduce bottle waste, in effect, that's absolutely.
Okay. Well, I don't see any other comments, so I think Commissioner Ward, you and I can take that language and revisit a couple of those points that were raised by the commissioners and then just put it into the report from last year. And we will update it and start, sharing back with you at the next meeting the whole report as it sits. And then we can start really seeing where we are with it and adding some of the new policies as we adopt them. Okay, thank you so much, Commissioner Ward. Greatly appreciate that. So we'll move on from agenda item 4 to agenda item 5. And this is our big item, which is the committee reports on policy recommendations for commission discussion and possible approval. You know, we have quite a few committees and several policies that we've seen before that we're going to see again today. And I'd like to start with those first so we can kind of pick up where we left off and then move on. So I'd like to start with the policy that we actually had on the Google document for everyone. And this was regarding organics. And I believe this was Commissioner Osagura and Sky that had updated it from our last meeting. So I can turn it over to Commissioner Sky or Commissioner Osagura to bring up that item, that policy.
If someone has the document and can load it, that would be great. Otherwise, I can try and pull up.
I have it and I can share.
Oh, perfect. Thank you, Commissioner Ward. So I think we can go through this relatively quickly. We had a good discussion at our last meeting, and Commissioner Osagura and I went through to try and make changes based on the comments that we received from all of you. I want to thank those of you that might have added some additional comments more recently. So I may not have seen all of the comments that came in. I see there's been a suggestion from Commissioner Dell at the top, for example. So if you can scroll up a little bit, the general comment, the terms negative carbon, low carbon, and sequestered carbon are used throughout. So just defining these at the beginning. So we can certainly do that. I think those are good comments. Okay. So this was an edit based on feedback we received that we want to highlight the waste management hierarchy and discuss how this fits into that, into those priorities. And so we added that the best way to address organic waste reduction is to follow the waste management hierarchy and start with reducing the amount of organic waste that's generated, then diverting waste through composting, anaerobic digestion, or other biomass conversion facilities. So kind of listing it in the order of priority. This edit is, again, kind of supporting that. While reducing organic waste sent to landfills is a top priority, these best management practices to reduce fugitive emissions should also be encouraged. That's discussing how reduction of landfill emissions fits into this proposal. This one, again, talks about diverting green waste, wood waste, and other organic waste from landfills and converting that to renewable natural gas or other products. The formatting on this section is a little bit off. It definitely shouldn't be that large or bold. And then Commissioner Medrano added some edits to this. We're mostly just formatting. Thank you, Commissioner Ward, for fixing that. So these are minor edits. I think they're all straightforward, changing ought to should, and adding inclusive and equitable economic development, mentioning wastewater treatment facilities and as another outlet in addition to dairies and landfills as areas where we're trying to reduce emissions. I don't see any other edits here. So these again are mostly minor edits. Commissioner Dell asked if we can include a dollar figure here. So I do know that information, so I'll add that to the proposal. I believe it's over the last 7 years, $150 or $175 million. So nowhere near what we're hoping to get on an annual basis. These again are minor edits that were suggested by the Commission last time around to focus on medium and heavy duty trucks as one of the big areas where we can utilize renewable natural gas in the short term. There's a question about how much of the renewable natural gas in-state can be used, and Commissioner Asagura helped me to add some information about how much natural gas we're importing and how that impacts our economy. And then we added some information about some of the benefits from diverting organic waste, creating renewable gas from it. So these are from the Bioenergy Association of California. I should probably pause and just see if there are any comments along the way, or would commissioners prefer I go through all the comments and then go back to any questions?
I don't see any comments, or I'd let you know. So I think everybody's okay, it looks like.
Great. These are, again, somewhat minor comments using the same terminology we used in the other proposal for counterproductive incentives. And then we added a discussion about just clarifying how the renewable natural gas standard relates to the renewable portfolio standard, which was for electricity, and talking about just the opportunity that we have in state, that we can replace as much as 20% or more of fossil natural gas with renewable natural gas and have a very significant reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. Some edits to the purpose to clarify what we're intending this proposal to do, which is really focused on collection, processing, and diversion of organic waste. So to clarify that it's all throughout the chain of the material being processed. And then these were edits about clarifying the role of other facilities, not just composting.
I have one comment now that I'm rereading it again.
Yes.
Is there a way to change organic waste to just organics? I really don't think there's any organic that's a waste unless we've made it a waste by contaminating it. It's, I hate to use that word wasting when it's just organics.
We could say organic materials.
Mm-hmm.
Organics, I know is used on and off. I always find it a little bit confusing because organics are sometimes thought of as like organic food, or there's other connotations for it.
May I suggest organic discards as indicating something that has entered the discard stream to be managed?
Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion. What do you think, Commissioner Sanborn?
Fine with that. Yeah. I just don't want to call it a waste.
Okay, I'll make a note.
Commissioner Lapis, did you want to speak to that?
I think organic discards is a really good compromise. I was going to say I struggle with this myself. In statute, we refer to it as organic waste, but I completely understand the criticism, and I kind of struggle with it, and so I sort of switched to the bulky phrase, yard trimmings and food scraps. But I feel like organics, so that's what I was going to suggest, but organics discards is actually a much cleaner way to say it.
That's a good suggestion. I'll go through as I'm making some of the other edits to add in some figures and the definitions. I'll go through and make sure that we're consistently using organic discards. Thank you, Commissioner Ward. And then in terms of the proposal, again, Commissioner Madrano had some good suggestions. Rather than starting each section with recommend, we just be more direct and say create, establish, allocate. We made some clarifying edits to the funding, again, to clarify that this is, we really want to fund all of the different components of the system: collection, processing, diversion, and interconnection projects for reducing landfill waste that provide a reduction in carbon emissions. So you kind of see that throughout the specific allocations as well. And I think those were all of the substantial edits to the document.
Scott, I did have one that I highlighted in yellow this morning, so you might not have seen it, where it says the funding shall be allocated as follows, that I'm very concerned about the cost of these programs, and I'm very interested in trying to emphasize the need for source reduction first. We're coming into another year of drought. It's now being called a super drought. We're still watering grass. We're cutting off farmers and generating all this organic material that's totally unnecessary. And I'm wondering if the allocation of the funds can somehow be, they can at least try an attempt to prioritize communities that are making a significant effort towards waste reduction and reduction of the organics first, as a way to say, because we need to right size the system. I don't want to overbuild this very expensive system because we didn't right size it first by doing source reduction and waste prevention first. This is a lot of money.
I think that's a fair point. And we can put that right up top before we talk about the allocations.
Thank you. And I think the next one is Commissioner Davis, and then Toyota.
Yeah, well, a couple of things on the discussion of waste. Just point of information that CalRecycle actually in the 1383 regulations specifically called out that edible food recovered for human consumption is not solid waste. So just to reinforce that idea and maybe a bit of information. The regulations also require compliance with model landscape ordinance, and at least the communities in my area have been enforcing that for quite a while. So you may want to include a reference to that. I guess I'm curious about the source of the funding, and that, you know, it's good to throw numbers in there. It would be good if the numbers, you know, kind of had a basis in support, but the source of the funding is always going to be a question, and I guess that's may come back around from one of the proposals that we received. But,
so in terms of those two comments, I definitely think source reduction should be prioritized. I would suggest the model landscaping ordinances should be added to the source reduction section of the report. We really want to continue to prioritize that first. This section, this proposal is in the later sections of the report, and it's just focused on once we do source reduce, and as Chair Sanborn had said, we want to right size this and start with source reduction, and then for what we know will be remaining material, how do we invest in the infrastructure to make sure that we're actually getting to the goals of 1383 and diverting at least 75% of our organic waste, which is a tremendous amount of material. Even if we were to somehow source reduce half of what we send to landfills every year, it would still be millions and millions of tons every year of organic material that's going to landfill. So we have a long way to go. In terms of the funding, there is a description, and I've always felt that our proposals shouldn't be overly specific, so we identify potential sources of funding, but really leave it to the legislature to define and figure out exactly how to cobble together. We're identifying the magnitude of the need, but we're leaving it to the legislature, and includes even statewide ballot measures, which potentially could provide some funding for this.
Is there a source when you say identifying the magnitude? Is there a source for that? Or a comprehensive?
Yeah. Or would you pull up the language again real briefly at the top of the section where we just above where we list the amounts? We briefly talk about the different
Number 3.
Yeah, I think it was at the very beginning of this section. here. So we say allocate $350 million per year from, and then there's a list of potential funding sources: RPS, CGRF, statewide tax, and/or bond funding. And those are just suggestions. There could even be other potential funding sources.
No, I'm sorry, I misspoke. I meant the 350 million. Where does that number come from?
Oh, that's
that number.
So that's based on the 4 different categories, and it's based on a combination of sources. We were looking at CalRecycle's estimates for how much it would cost for statewide implementation of SB 1383, rough estimates of how much the infrastructure would cost for that. And so it's rough numbers. It might be off by a little bit, but it's and the order of magnitude of the amount of funds that we would need to make a significant progress.
Yeah, I guess if you could call that out, it lends credibility. If they're CalRecycle numbers, if they're court numbers, where's it coming from? I think it would help.
We can do that.
Great, thank you.
It's Commissioner Toyota and then Lapis.
Thank you. I mean, this is really great so far. I just have 2 main comments. And again, one of them comes back to funding. One of the things that we're trying to do in the Market Development Committee is try to find a way, obviously, to open up markets. And just recently, we were having a conversation on maybe getting the GGRF funds to support just moving recycled asphalt shingles, and CalRecycle was like, no, there's no money. And even if there were $350 million from the state put into this, it wouldn't put a dent into the infrastructure that's going to be needed to actually move renewable gas into the system and into vehicles or anything like that. And I just feel like that should be mentioned, that somewhere this is going to have to be a partnership, that the state can't solve the problems of the infrastructure needs for this, for recycling, for everything that was more or less listed in the beginning of this meeting, that it's got to be a partnership or something, but the state can't do it alone. And if you want, I mean, I'm happy to put some language in. I know that's what you asked, and I read it late, and I didn't have it, so I would do that. My other comment is back a few pages, when you're kind of talking about the state that's working possibly stops incentivizing near zero emission medium and heavy duty trucks. And with the new ZEV mandate from the governor, that is not necessarily true, but it is true for natural gas, because I don't think that's included in the renewable gas portfolio. But I do think that we should put some mention there that the state is working on ZEV for medium and heavy duty trucks, but for electricity and hydrogen. And I just because that's something that is happening, I'd be happy to write just a little note in there for that as well, just to say, we know this is happening. It is kind of pertinent.
Yeah, that's what it was trying to convey. So I'm happy to, if you can tweak that language to make it clear that there is a conflict. If they're moving towards electrification, it leaves out the potential for a market for renewable natural gas as a vehicle fuel.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
Commissioner Lapis.
I have a logistical question and then a couple specific things that jumped out at me. Logistically, where are we in the process? This is a first reading and we can provide input after this, and it's going to come back for potential adoption at the next meeting, or where are we in the process? I guess the first question.
This is a second reading, but because there's so many comments and some of them were comments that I need to come back and make further edits to, I would suggest that we essentially have a third reading that will hopefully be the final one.
That makes sense. So a couple things that jump out. I mean, first of all, I really appreciate the changes you've made. I am a couple issues that arose for me when I was reading through this. On the waste hierarchy section, I mean, I think we've always said that in terms of waste hierarchy, it's waste prevention, then composting, which we've always included anaerobic digestion as part of, so biological decomposition, and then after that, biomass conversion or combustion. We've always thought of that as sort of lower on the hierarchy, not equivalent. It's still better than landfilling. So I wonder if we could clarify that in this document. And then another...
I put it in, but if you have suggestions for how to make that clearer, have at it.
Okay, so maybe I'll take a look, but the way I read it, it's anaerobic digestion or biomass conversion as being equal. And I think for material that is compostable or digestible, the higher use would be to compost or digest it. Obviously, woody biomass and other things are not going to be very compostable.
I suggest if we're going to address the waste hierarchy, the easiest way to read it is literally say, here's the waste hierarchy in law, but for organics, there's more, variations and areas of gray. And the way the commission sees it is this, and then literally 1, 2, 3, 4 in order of priority. Maybe that would be crystal clear that people couldn't misunderstand it. Just a suggestion.
I can try to work on that. And then I liked the changes you made about landfill gas. Basically, and we're talking about diverted organics. But some of the narrative, he didn't have the redlining. If you were just reading it straight through, it would still sound like we're talking about landfill gas as part of these incentives. And, we oppose the renewable gas standard because of the inclusion of landfill gas in it. There are sections that talk about how landfills are highly regulated. Many landfill operators, have other processes to use landfill gas, blah, blah, blah. And then it says these best management practices to reduce future emissions should also be encouraged. And I think when you read that combined with we need a renewable gas standard, in my mind that reads that a renewable gas standard should support landfill gas collection, which I don't think was your intent necessarily, Toby.
It wasn't.
Okay, so that might just be a wording thing.
But I think Commissioner Lapis, there has to be a mention of the best management practices that should be at landfills, and those should be encouraged. I don't think what you're saying is we should say, well, let's worry about everything else, and landfills can not have best management practices. So
this is a distinction that's important to me, but I believe that landfill gas regulation should be mandated, not encouraged. I'm afraid that any incentive based on landfill gas generation will lead to increased landfill gas generation. And Alex, I know you and I have talked about this a little bit, but
right.
Ultimately, I think the commission, we're not supposed to be discussing ways to reduce greenhouse gas impacts from disposal. We're supposed to be looking at organic waste reduction. And so I think landfill gas energy is a way to reduce impacts from disposal, but that's not really within our charter. And it seems like a nuance that could get lost without saying we're supporting a renewable gas standard, which I personally do not support.
And I think a holistic approach to this topic does include how do you manage those type of emissions. So I guess we're going to agree to disagree on that one, Nick.
I don't think the two are mutually exclusive, but Commissioner Nokolis, the intent was for us to focus on our charter, which is diverting organic waste. And if there's ambiguity, I think it would be helpful if you took a stab at adding some clarity to that.
Okay. And then again, then Zane, looking at the proposed incentive funds, I I know this is the renewable energy section, but I would want to make sure that any incentive funds are technology neutral, so they include both composting and any energy production. Because again, we don't want to create an artificial incentive to produce energy from something that is compostable or digestible. So I will take a stab at that too. But I mean, ultimately, I think this is getting a lot closer. I like that you got rid of the dairies, so we're not really weighing in on that, which is outside of our expertise. And I think almost all the improvements are significant improvements.
Thank you.
Commissioner Schneider?
This is going back to what Chair Sanborn and Davis were talking about. So with grant funding, I wasn't quite sure I understood what Commissioner Sanborn's recommendation was, that funding would go first to cities that are more farther advanced. The reason I bring this up is I was on a defensible space wildland urban interface call last night on how we're going to try to get our residents to plant the right plants to reduce fire risk. And that makes me think of all of the nurseries that sell invasives that quite often are much more flammable. And we've got a lot of work just in the plants that we put out into the marketplace. And I really liked Commissioner Davis's model landscape ordinance, which we don't have, so I need to go learn more. Maybe that's a source reduction side of what you're doing, Commissioner Sky, and either we punt it over to good old Ted, sorry, Commissioner Ward, or we put a little bit more in, because it galls me that every nursery I walk into, they sell Scottish broom, and it's highly invasive and highly flammable. And the firefighters last night were really encouraging, believe it or not, at the end of the call was, succulents don't burn as badly as every other plant. And this was largely talking to our rural communities, which even here in the peninsula we have, but half of my city is now wildland urban interface. So we have a lot of work to do in tying all of that in together. So thank you, Commissioner Davis. And just some of our cities really could use the funding, but maybe it's regional. Maybe it goes back to when we were rolling out integrated pest management and we got the nurseries to sell less toxic products. And if we could get our nurseries to go that way, we're getting a tiny step forward. But I mean, we all preach right-sized planting. I bought a 3-foot plant that's now 9 feet tall. Sometimes they're just marked wrong.
Yeah. I think those are great comments. I see my role is to continue to point to source reduction as our first step, and then talk about how this fills in the next step.
Okay, I don't see any further comments, and I guess we got a lot of really good feedback on this, and it's getting better every time. We are getting down to the wire on finishing all these policies for the report, so my encouragement would be to Commissioner Lapis to help quickly with the language updates. You brought up some really good points, and working with at least get those over to Commissioner Sky and Osigura so that we can hopefully get this on the agenda at the next meeting and actually approve it. That would be fantastic, and just add it into the report, which Commissioner Ward and I will have as a draft, so we can start really seeing what it's going to look like by the end of June. Okay.
Can I suggest, just to expedite, if folks can get their comments into the Google document by the end of next week, and that'll give the following week for everyone to review, make sure everyone's comfortable with the edits that other commissioners made, so that at the next meeting, I can just basically ask, is everyone comfortable with the final version that was posted, and then we can add it to the report.
By this Friday would be great, because then you could really, everybody has enough time to really read it and be sure we're done. Okay, fantastic. Thank you for your work on this. It's a really big deal and a very important policy. Thanks again, Commissioner Sky and Osigura. Okay, so I think the next policy we will move on to, that we have already heard multiple times, that was on our very high list of to-dos for as a commission, was policy number 15. The definition of what is recyclable. This is what we continue to get a lot of comments on. It's very important. Commissioner Donlevy, I believe this is yours. I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, good morning. Thank you. Chair Sanborn or Commissioner Ward, if one of you guys could bring this up on your screen to share. Been working on this with Commissioner Lapis. I made a couple additions. Commissioner Lapis didn't have any additional comments or additions to it, but I did want to bring this up today. We've identified the qualification process, the 7 items that would determine if an item would meet the recyclability standard in California. We talked about it at the recycling committee meeting, where we'd be able to use a fact-based approach and identify what materials are actually being separated using the RDRS system, the Recycling, Disposal, and Reporting System, that all the solid waste facilities and recycling facilities are required to report on a quarterly basis. And by using that, we could maintain the list, and the commission will update the list annually. And then we can also identify a pathway to maintain acceptance. So as products want to get on the list, they can work with the facilities that are locally accepting the material and sorting the material, and then subsequently reporting that material through the RDRS system. And the producers, as they know more and more facilities are accepting it and more facilities are reporting it, once they get to a certain threshold, 60% of the facilities, I plugged in 45 facilities because we're identifying that there's 75 curbside processing facilities or MRFs that could accept this material. Once they achieve that 60% level, they could get to a conditional acceptance. And then once they present that 60% are accepting, and if they have written agreements with additional facilities to achieve the 75% threshold, or 60 facilities that are accepting and sorting and marketing that material separately, then they could get on the list. So the biggest addition to this is including that we would use the RDRS system as a way to track material type. And then if you could go to table 3, I think that would be the point for discussion. This is what we would use as identifying items that could get onto the list. So an item would not be eligible if it was not reported in the RDRS system by less than 60% or 45 curbside facilities for 6 of 8 consecutive quarters. There's no activity for those material types because it's clear that facilities are not sorting it. It's not an item that's being recognized by the curbside processing or the commercial processing operations as being an item that's worth recovering. Then the pathway begins with conditional acceptance, that the producers, as they're out working with these facilities to A, get them to accept it, and B, actually separate the material at the facilities and market it separately. Once they get to 45 facilities that are actually doing it for 3 consecutive quarters, then the producers of the products could come to the commission and tell us, we have great news. We have over 45% or 45 facilities in California that are now accepting and separating our material. And we do have written agreements with additional facilities to begin separating the material within the next 12 months. They could present that to the commission, and then the commission could acknowledge those products as conditionally acceptable, and they could begin plans to start labeling their material as recyclable in California. And then full acceptance is for material that's reported in the RDRS system being separated by 75% or 56 of the curbside facilities in California. And then once we've talked about acceptance, we would need to look at a removal level that I added, that if an item begins to fall off the list, and if less than 45 of the curbside facilities report separating the material for 2 of 4 consecutive quarters, at that point, the commission could look at removing items from a list. So I think we've identified how to get on the list. We've identified a pathway that's clearly going to be fact-based using the RDRS system, and it gives the producers the incentive to work with the curbside processing facilities and the jurisdictions to accept the material, but more importantly, to separate it and market it separately from other material. And once they've done that, they can come to the commission to present that their item is now accepted and being sorted, and it deserves the right to have the recycling label in California. So
Commissioner, yeah, Don Levy, there's a lot of questions coming up, so I just wanted to flag you in case you hadn't seen them. Commissioner Lapis, did you want to?
Yeah, Jeff, I'm sorry I did not get you this feedback in time. I'm struggling with this a little bit based on, I actually thought it was a great idea at first when we were talking about in the committee meeting in terms of using RDRS, but based on the data that was presented, the RDRS data, I just don't think that data is there. It seemed like it was all over the place. Different facilities were using different terms. It's only been 1 year of reporting, and so everyone's kind of all over the place. I'm just not sure I trust the data yet to be accurate. It seemed like it was not a very accurate description yet. And then on top of that, I think one issue that comes to my mind is that, basically saying, does a facility make a bale of this material and enter it into RDRS? And I'm afraid that's kind of gameable, because you look at something like, block foam and densified EPS. Yeah, a lot of facilities occasionally make a bale of it, but it's fairly rare. And to then be able to expand on that and say, well, yeah, they have expanded EPS. They've shipped a couple bales of it, reported under RDRS. So therefore, EPS is now curbside recyclable, would be a stretch. Same thing with aseptics and cartons. I know the Carton Council was buying bales of people who were making them. It was very, very rare. And if you have a couple bales, I don't think that's a regular process. So I'm afraid that it misses the quantity. It's just a yes or no. I'm not totally sure how to address that. So that's one thing that came up. The other thing that came up for me is this actually came up in the context of legislation that's being proposed, but maybe a question I'd like to pose to the group. What happens if there's legislation that passes that mandates recycled content for a type of material? In my mind, that means that if they are complying with those mandates, then they've satisfied the has markets part of the definition, not necessarily the MRFs take it part, but at least that it satisfies that part of the definition. And I think we should, I think it would make sense to have that be part of the on-ramp for getting on the list, is that, you have the 7 criteria, right? And 2 of them are about having markets. And you could check those 2 boxes by being in compliance with a recycled content mandate set through legislation. Just a thought.
Okay. Yeah, with the RDRS system, you're right. It does need some refinement on the material types. And I think the commission or the committee working with the RDRS staff and then outreach to the facilities to narrow down and identify what materials they're actually reporting on, because the RDRS staff did a fantastic job, and they included every material type possible. And the interpretation from your facility or my facility might be a little bit different, but I think if our DRS narrowed down the selection so you don't have 4 or 5 different mixed paper categories, it'll help everybody out, and then ultimately give us the information that we need. I think the original 15 that we've identified, there's no disputing those are the items that have met all the criteria to be on the original list. There's some other items that might be close that I think in the very near future, in the next year or two, could achieve the levels to get onto the list. As far as the quantity issue, I don't think we had quantity as a criteria because there are some items that are just very, very low volume that if they are being accepted at the facilities and sorted, they should be on regardless of the quantity. But if they meet all the criteria and they are separating it and they are reporting it on a quarterly basis, they should be on. So if 56 facilities are separating styrofoam and they're all reporting it, even though it would be a very low quantity, they should be on the list. And then as far as recycled content, we have not talked about that in the past, but even if an item does have a recycled content mandate, that product still needs to be accepted, it still needs to be sorted, and still marketed separately. So until those criteria are met, even though it does have a very good recycled content mandate.
Parts of the definition. I think it covers the market part, not the MRF part of it. So it covers 2 of the 7.
Yeah.
But, you know, this did come up in legislation, and there's at least a proposal floating around out there to preempt our ability to put anybody on the list who has a recycled content mandate, and I'm not comfortable with that proposal. And so that's why I've been thinking about, does that mandate address part of the definition? And I think it does, but not the entire thing.
Yeah, I think that if there's a post-consumer content legislation, that's obviously going to create the demand. But if nobody's actually separating it to get it to those consumers that, or the manufacturers that want that material, it shouldn't be a product that's labeled recyclable. So the people that need that material or want that material are going to have to work with the facilities and provide that incentive to separate the material.
If I can just, can I go out of order on this topic? Just one thing. Unfortunately, the recycled content mandate doesn't ensure that the material will be coming from California. I study the import data on, and because we're a state, we can't make our law that it has to be California plastic. So the recycled content mandate could be completely met through imported plastic, imported PET bottles, imported clamshells. In fact, I read that we have clamshells coming from Mexico. And we could have zero recycling in California. And it's really a shame we can't put a domestic content requirement on it. But unfortunately, recycled content doesn't ensure that it's going to be our PET bottles.
Correct.
Hey, Commissioner, I would like to keep in order. That was skipping 5 people just to honor everybody putting their names in the chat. And we do have a lot of comments on this, so I'm glad we took it up early. Go ahead. Okay, well, we'll go on next then. I think our next commenter was, it was Commissioner Sky. All right.
I didn't put my name in the...
Oh, that was up too high.
Yeah, I think
sorry. Yeah, sorry, John, it was you.
Yeah. I have a lot. I have a lot of questions and a lot of comments. Now we've started using the Google Doc for the first time. Are we able to use that, for example, on this one? Because a lot of what I have are just small fix-it items. but I have some substantial comments as well. So if we can avoid turning pages on the fix-it items and bring this back with another chance, and then I'll limit my comments. But I agree with Nick about the RDRS. I'm not sure it was intended for this purpose. I think the document could be enhanced by a discussion of the ability of the RDRS to serve the purpose for which it's intended. And so that was, one kind of a broad suggestion. That there's 2 points of significant confusion in my mind now. We have a list that grew from that massive Excel spreadsheet. And now we're saying, okay, we have that list, but really we're going to use RDRS. Am I understanding that correctly? And if so, why are we referencing the process that we're abandoning going forward? And then my second major question has to do with the commission role and Coward Cycle's role in the administration of this, which is maybe if you can answer the first question, maybe it'll help on the second.
Yeah, so the process and the spreadsheet, that generated the initial results. And again, the first 15 I don't think are disputed at all. I think there's some debate over items that some people think should be on the list. But using the RDRS system, that will help validate moving forward that we're using data supported or submitted by the facilities on what they're actually marketing.
Yeah. I mean, there's such a disparity between the two. You've got 7 criteria that don't really reflect what's necessarily in the statute. The first element of the statute was referencing the Green Guide. And with 60% threshold, yeah, we moved to 75 with no explanation about why 75. Coward Cycle's under the same requirements for food service. They're using 60%, we're saying 75. And so, there's, if we're gonna stay with, if we're gonna move to the RDRS, why are we creating a report making findings about that spreadsheet? If we're going to do that, I'd suggest that gets moved into an appendix with a more detailed explanation. For example, I can't look at that spreadsheet. It has cost data that's 8 to 12 months old, and we're saying there's insufficient market value for some materials. That's one of the factors, Then we move to RDRS and say, well, if it's being recovered and sold, there's sufficient market value. There's a market. So the RDRS standard is simply a percentage of recovery to meet all those criteria, and yet we've set up this lengthy analysis and made some findings around that. And then we're going forward and saying, well, never mind, we're not going to do that anymore. To me, it's really confusing. I don't doubt that the 15 items would remain on the list. I pulled up the spreadsheet, looked again at revisions that I put in, and they're not there, right? So, the material I'm talking about, Jeff, it's polypropylene by my analysis is at 75%. By your analysis, it's 71%. And then, does it have value? And the value from a year ago is very different than the value today. So I just suggest that we pull all that prior great work that you guys did to crunch those numbers and put them in an appendix if we're moving forward to a different system. That would obviate, I think, a lot of my concern with the accuracy of the documents.
The spreadsheet is something. Yeah, the spreadsheet is something that we would continue to update and continue to use that. But the RDRS system is the scoreboard. That's going to demonstrate if items are actually separated, because we could agree that 71%, 75% acceptance is a criteria that certain items might meet. But when the RDRS system demonstrates that only 10 facilities are actually separating that material, it really doesn't meet the criteria to be on the list. So,
I share Commissioner Lappis's observation about the limitations there, because I look, for example, there are, I think, 9 different categories that you could respond to with polypropylene. And so which are the 10? I don't know. And of course, none of the reports yet are public, so it's hard to know. I just think if we're gonna use the RDS, then we really need to take a look at the applicability of that data for our purposes. And I think it would be. I'm not sure it was created for this purpose, right? So, is it applicable? Is it close? But you said we're going to continue to utilize the spreadsheet?
Yeah, we can use that as a tool because on an annual basis, the commission will update the list and make the recommendations to CalRecycle. And those would be the items that get to have the recycling label placed on their products in California. And whether it's the producers or whether you or Commissioner Lappis want to validate which facilities are separating the material, you're more than welcome to do that. But when
I tried to do that on the spreadsheet, and it's still, the spreadsheet's cell-protected, and so I can't go in and make the changes, but I've conveyed those changes, and they're still.
Yeah.
If we're going to use that spreadsheet, we really need to spend some time. It's a beast. I don't know how many screens someone might use to view it as a single document, but you can't, because it's self-protected, you can't freeze the top and left column. So you can't go across, say, for a specific facility looking at a specific material. You have to, it's really awkward to use, and it has a lot of data in there, but, is the data any more or less reliable than the RDRS data? I don't know. And, so that's a concern. I'm also curious about the relationship between the commission and CalRecycle. I know there's language in our statute that says the commission can make, in 1583, the commission should identify products that are recyclable or compostable as defined. But then the reference section says the department shall adopt regulations to establish a process specific to food service. And but in the earlier, the initial section, it says the department shall make that determination. And it doesn't specifically point to food service. So I'm confused about the relationship between the commission making identification and CalRecycle adopting regulations and how all that fits together. And there's a reference in the document, but it's pretty brief, and it doesn't really point to that conflict between the statutes. So that would be my second major concern about it. And I could propose some language. Again, if we're going to use the Google Doc to modify, I can go in and make some suggestions on that. I guess I don't want to take a whole bunch of time.
Yeah, we got a lot of other comments.
Yeah, I know we do. So, but there is on Senate Bill 343 has an on-ramp of plan about how to get there. We've heard, for example, at Rexpo, we've heard in market development this idea that something's not recyclable and that you've got to achieve now a 60% recycling rate. I think 343 has a different on-ramp. Whether it gets adopted or not remains to be seen, but I think it's worth looking at that, particularly the people who are familiar with that bit of legislation. And I think at some point that on-ramp, that ability to become recyclable really begins to delve into market development issues. And maybe we should spend some time there. But I'm just not comfortable with the lack of explanation about some of the real conflicts between the drafts. So again, I'll submit some written suggestions on the Google Doc. Thanks.
Any response, Commissioner Dunleavy? Do you want to speak to that before we move on?
I think the written comments will be helpful, and we'll want to make sure that what we're doing is consistent with any legislation that passes. So we could amend this if 343 does pass.
Yeah, and I can say that 343 also has a very high cost. So we're trying to figure out also, because if CalRecycle has to do a whole lot of work, it adds to their cost, and then we have to figure out how to fund that cost. And then I had the same question, by the way, as Commissioner Davis did on the role of the commission versus CalRecycle. I wasn't sure if we should be in the role of doing this work. It seems to me that's a public process through regulation, but that's just reiterating John's concern. So Vice Chair Valle, I think you're next.
Thank you. No, I didn't send in a request to speak, but I will very quickly. I think that the proof of the pudding will be when jurisdictions actually look at our recommendations. And on this particular one, the big hurdle will be acceptance and who's going to take the lead. I know that Long Beach has taken the lead on certain plastics, but pragmatically, what I'm hearing anecdotally from public works directors in Alameda County is that they don't want to be the first city to reduce the amount of items that people are putting in their recycle carts because that will be politically unpopular. And as much as we are embedded in the work that we do and believe in the work that we do, I think it's always important for us to realize that the people who make decisions about recycling franchises and what goes in are very detached from our conversations and the things that we're talking about, which we are embedded in and day out. And reality hits me when I hear people who are on the outside say things like, we don't want to be the first and who else is doing it? And maybe it should be done uniformly throughout the state so that nobody winds up with egg on their face politically and pragmatically as a jurisdiction. And then you have residents complaining because there was a time, for example, when our program was mandated to take plastic bags that were all enclosed in clear plastic bags so that we could see that there were plastic bags that were brought from retail stores that were giving them away every single time that you shopped. And that some of that literature is still out there, and people have it on the refrigerator saying, you still take plastic bags, don't you? That's going to be the real challenge for us on a pragmatic basis. But I think it'll have to be done, I think, uniformly, as opposed to jurisdiction by jurisdiction, which will be a huge, laborious process.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And acceptance, I don't think is the biggest issue. I think separating the material is the biggest issue, because unfortunately, so many MRFs, curbside collection programs, have been pushed into accepting material because the other city is doing it and the other facility is doing it. And at the risk of losing business, they accepted material that they might not have had the ability to separate, or they might not have had the ability to market. But the system's evolved where the contamination level in all the programs is excessive with a lot of material that's not recyclable. So I think the big hurdle is, and it's easier for me to say because I don't run a facility at this point, is for the facilities to address it with their jurisdiction, saying, we can no longer accept these materials. It's causing contamination and cross-contamination. We have no markets for bags inside of bags. We have no markets for 3 through 7. Or we can accept 5 because we do have a market and we are separating it and we have an optical sorter. But I think the biggest challenge is going to be for the facilities. And I think our list helps the facilities open those discussions with their jurisdictions to say, these are items that we can accept, we can sort, and we can market. The other items are just wishful. And we would like to have those removed from the program because they're causing contamination and increased cost in our operation. So I think the first step is for the facilities to start saying no. And I think our list will help those facilities.
Commissioner Kalpikov, I had you after Commissioner Valle.
Yeah, thanks, Heidi. Thanks, Jeff, for the good work on this. And I I can't argue with anything you said regarding MRFs sorting high contamination. My only concern, I think we had a robust conversation on the full commission about 2 meetings ago, was the RDRS system and how new it is and how broad it is. My company itself, I mentioned, when you choose PP plastics, that comes into 5 different levels or 9 different levels from what Minister Davis said. It needs to be refined for the purpose, before we use it for the purpose of this policy. And it's got to be more specific. I'm sorry. Is that better? So it needs to be refined a little bit, Jeff. I don't know if I'm confident or comfortable, I should say, in using the RDRS system as 100% the only factor for choosing what is on that list. I wish I had some language I can give you on what other, I think maybe it's a combination of Jan's list that she put together and her group, which went to the MRFs and individually asked the question of what are they sorting out. I would be confident with the RDRS system if it was more refined and there was maybe an education process on where and how to select each plastic type moving forward. And that's my only comment.
Yeah, thank you. The RDRS system, they launched it, I'll say pretty quick. So I think they can change it and refine it even quicker. And then using that information and then either from producers or people that want to get items on a list to identify the facilities that are actually sorting the material. I think it was back in October when we were having the discussion about polypropylene number 5. I asked everybody on the commission if they could talk to their local MRFs and find out if they are separating polypropylene number 5. And I think I only heard comments from you and Commissioner Davis that you had facilities that were actually separating it. So if we want to get an item on the list, the people that want to get that item on the statewide list will need to help identify all the facilities that are doing the separation. And I think the biggest burden goes to the producers to generate the demand to get that material separated. Price is one thing. There's some prices that are pretty high right now. And hopefully it's generating more facilities that are separating it. And that helps get them on the pathway to get on the list long term. But I think our initial goal is identifying what items should have the recycling label now. So if legislation passes, those items will be rewarded with that label. And if they're not on the list, they would need to take them off until they can demonstrate that A, there's acceptance, and B, facilities are actually separating the material and marketing it separately. So.
Okay, we're going to try to keep moving. The people who have not spoken yet, I'm going to hit them first and then go back to anybody else who still wishes to speak.
No, so that I would be next.
Right, but you've already skipped. No, so I'm trying to get to people who haven't had a chance to speak.
Commissioner Sanborn, I've put hundreds of hours and my group has put hundreds of hours into developing the spreadsheet. I'd like to have a 2-minute comment here, which is just to revisit the beginning of this. We were formed last June, and the recycling committee was started up. At that time in July, when we had the first recycling committee meeting, we all agreed that the criteria in SB Packaging Act would be used. The 75% came from the diversion goal. There was the reason for that. Last July, the RDRS system was not operating. There was no data. We said, how can we do a fact-based approach to find the real data on these 7 criteria? My group put hundreds of hours into surveying, just so that the public hears this. We didn't call MRFs. We did public acceptance surveys, put this spreadsheet together, started showing it to the recycling committee and then to the full commission, and had it checked with commissioners. Commissioner Osigura checked it for all of his waste management sites and so on. And then we brought it to the full commission and we showed how it was done. We said, please give us information. And I'm pretty sure the VRTEC information was corrected in there. If it wasn't, let's see. It's down to 71% because one MRF in Bakersfield is now closed. And we immediately got criticism from several members on the commission that this isn't fact-based. This is just a spreadsheet that an NGO put together. And we said, well, give us information. Okay, how can we improve this? Continued to get the same complaint over and over again with no offers of a solution to make it better. And we get all the way around to December, January, and Commissioner Dunleavy says, all right, now there's the RDS system to use. There's actually fact-based data. We've been criticized that the data that we pulled together isn't fact-based, isn't, official. So now we've got the RDRS data to use. We go through a big effort to get the public download from that. And now we're being criticized that the RDRS data isn't good enough, right? So what we've put in this suggestion is not only using the RDRS data, the state data should be the approved government data. Yes, it can get better, but there's another way. The MRFs, the product companies can work with the MRFs and show contracts of acceptance. In the next month, any product company that wants to go get their acceptance can call the 75 MRFs. They can use the list and they can show a contract. It's right there. 45 curbside MRFs demonstrate that 11 additional have agreements. Okay, you can get 56 agreements and show them, but there has to be concrete proof. And at this point, I have to step back and wonder, from July all the way around till April 21st and 21 commission meetings, are we serious about getting this done? Or will we be just replicating every meeting with bringing up old complaints, new complaints, and no solutions to actually drive to the finish line? Thank you.
Okay, I'm just going to make a friendly reminder to commissioners to try and put things in the chat and stay in order, please. Commissioner Medrano?
Two very quick points in the interest of time. One is I support giving the authority to make this decision to CalRecycle only and not to the commission. That's one point. And the second, is there a possibility that we could, instead of having a percentage of acceptance in MRFs, it'd be more of a acceptance or weight, or by weight percentage, meaning that there could be a large market, like say in LA County, that's developing and that's going to help push other markets throughout the state develop a lot more, as opposed to having 60% of MRFs throughout the state only accepting a little bit of material. So I'm willing to give some comments in writing at a later point, but I'll stand by for some comments if that's the case. Thank you.
Yeah, that's an interesting discussion. I know federal guidelines had 60% acceptance, and the producers would go to the biggest facilities in the biggest cities to say that we have a facility that provide service to LA County and count that entire population. It gets into the debate of, should it be the biggest cities have the biggest voice, or should all facilities in the state have equal voices? So if we're looking at Wairika, if we're looking at Redding, if we're looking at Blythe, should they have equal weight in demonstrating that it's recyclable statewide instead of just in LA? Because if we go on a population based, of course, it's more economical to do things in a highly urban area, whether it's the Bay Area or Los Angeles. But if that was the weighted criteria and a product is given the recyclable label, my concern is it would create contamination issues in the rural areas where they see recycling symbols on items and they don't have the ability to do it. So it's definitely a good point of discussion for the commission. Do we do a population-based or equal facility-based? So the rural and the smaller areas basically have as strong a voice as the higher population facilities.
Okay, we have literally 20 minutes left in this entire section, and we still have like 6 more policies. So I'm going to skip anybody who's already spoken and just go to the people who have not had a chance to speak. That's Robert's Rules of Order to make sure everybody gets heard. So I'm going to start with Commissioner Oseguera. I believe hasn't spoken yet.
I just want to make, some comments regarding what Commissioner Valle mentioned, and just bring back the commission to, just a reminder that we were looking for clarity of message for consumers to truly understand what's recyclable, for them to understand what goes in the blue bin. Especially we're putting in laws now where we have SB 1383 with 3 different collection containers or 4. And there's a definite need for folks to understand what goes in them. And we talked about that with AB 939. We had the initial list of materials that grew to, I don't know, in some places, I'm being facetious here, 71 products. And those products are not recyclable. And we have to get back to materials that are recyclable and clarity of message to the consumer so they understand where to put items. The next thing that we discuss is recyclability, that those materials that are put in that blue bin truly have a market where to go. We talked about China market, the China meltdown that said, we'll take everything, but a lot of that wasn't being recycled. So getting back to recyclability of those materials and making sure that we create market demand by recycling content of those materials, but ensuring that those products then truly are separated, sorted, and have an end market so that we're not doing wishful recycling. So that's it. I don't want to make it very long, but just remind everyone where we were. We can't get back to 71 materials in a blue container because what we'll have is a bunch of residual that ends up where we don't want it to be.
Yeah, thank you. The clarity of message is so important, and it's getting our recycling programs back to recycling programs and not diversion programs that end up being greenwashing programs.
I think Commissioner Toyota and then Sky haven't been heard yet, so we'll let them go next and then follow up with everyone for one last bite.
Yeah, I would just like to say for this, when we moved to the RDRS system, I had some concerns about that as well. But again, after working through markets and everything, I think one of the biggest problems with recycling is the infrastructure and knowing where it is and knowing what's recyclable and getting to the bottom of that. And I believe that should be something that is within CalRecycle's realm of something to do. And so I fully support that if we're going to draw this line of what's recyclable, that we should use the RDRS system and push CalRecycle or make those suggestions to make it what it needs to be. So it's an official CalRecycle list that has the information. It's a brand new, so it's going to have to be tweaked, and we can work on that. If this is what we're going to do, then we can give suggestions to that. And I think that CalRecycle, at the end of the day, one of the best things they can do to support recycling is know what's moving out there, where these facilities are, even far greater than just curbside, But this is a really good start, and I think that that's the way we should go and support.
Scott?
Thank you.
I completely agree with both Commissioners Esseger and Toyota. We should be empowering CalRecycle to improve the RDRS so that this can be a useful tool, and really just tell them, you know what we need to do. In terms of 75% versus 60% and what role larger markets should have, like LA County, I do agree that actually all of the MRFs should have a voice, but we should also be taking into consideration that smaller MRFs may not have the ability or the infrastructure to collect additional materials that might otherwise have a market. And to take that into consideration, we should perhaps consider that lower 60% threshold so that we're not creating too much weight for facilities that just don't have the investment to get materials that otherwise would have a market.
Okay, so with that, we'll go back quickly to the two who had already spoken, Commissioners Lapis and Davis, and then hopefully we can wrap this up and move on to another item before we have to close.
So I had a couple more thoughts. So back to my earlier comment, and I think based on what other folks have said, can we all agree that the current RDRS data isn't there for us to have some sort of automatic, X number in RDRS means you're in? I mean, I think we want to get there, and maybe that could be part of the recommendation for moving forward, is that we want to transition to RDRS data once it's more available and more accurate, and we have a longer track history with it. So I got a few thumbs up there. Second question is, when we were originally working on this legislation, we were envisioning this commission updating the list over time. It seems like almost nobody feels like that's the appropriate role of the commission. So should one of our recommendations be that in lieu of that, we have CalRecycle take over and maybe consult with us? It seems like I might have been wrong about that originally based on everybody's comments. Okay, and then my third quick comment was, I think the question about the big MRFs versus small MRFs, I think that the compromise there, and if I understand correctly, this is what the FTC does for the green guides, it would be MRFs serving 60% of the population. So it's not 60% of MRFs, it's not, but it's, I think that covers most of the state. It doesn't get every rural MRF, but I think that makes sense as an alternative.
I like that recommendation.
As far as transitioning to the RDRS, I think everybody's in agreement it's not perfect. Those CalRecycle staff that are listening to it, if any of the RDRS people are, I think they would be excited and encouraged that there's a group of stakeholders on the commission that want to engage with them and improve what they've created to help the recycling system in general. I'm sure they're excited about that. As far as not having it be a part of the commission work, I would just open that up. But as far as 60% of the population, that would mean the Bay Area and Southern California would really influence and dictate what gets the recycling symbol, that I think would have a negative impact on Yreka, Susanville, the rural counties. I would like to see it total facilities instead of total population. So there's an incentive for the producers to go up to Ready, go to Yreka, go down to Blythe, and help them with their programs, because they're just as important. And if we put a recycling symbol just because it's accepted in the Bay Area or Southern in LA County and Orange County, that could have a negative impact on these rural communities that always struggle to pay for their programs. So I would like that it stay total facilities, 60% of the facilities instead of 60% of the population.
Can I just throw out,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
throw out maybe 60% of the facilities or facilities serving 75% of the population? And that way, there's an opportunity for folks to, it provides a larger opportunity to focus on bigger facilities if that's a pathway to diverting more material.
Great. And I think Commissioner Davis, you're the last one that wanted to speak second time.
Yeah, I'm still struggling with how I'm still struggling on the polypropylene. So I'm sorry. I just found the updated survey from December 10th, which I believe is the final one. So I had not, in my earlier comment, which I will retract, I was using November's survey, but I can't tell. So I'll circle back on my comments. I still can't get to that 71%, 75%. I just have a hard time with them.
Yeah, Commissioner Davis, I mean, the acceptance number is very close. It's agreed that it's accepted in a lot of programs. I've reached out to the producers that have submitted comments to the commission, and when I've asked them to identify the facilities that are actually separating the material that goes silent, if you would like to do the work for them, and you can survey the 75 or 76 facilities that are on the list. The contact information is on the Excel sheet. If you want to do that survey for them and identify all the facilities that are actually separating PP5 and marketing it, that would be helpful to see where it is. If you think that your information is better than the RDRS, that would be helpful for the discussion.
Well, again, I'm not claiming any information is better than any other. My initial comment was we've got two different sets of data now, and if we're going forward with RDRS, it's confusing to have this other set of data. So, and manipulating that other set of data, it is still very difficult for me. So.
Yeah, okay. I would like to move this forward because I think the 15 items that we are recommending are undisputable. And if you would like to get polypropylene added to the list, and if you would like to do the work for the producers, please update the information. Contact the facilities.
Jeff, I'm using polypropylene as an example because I'll go back through now that I have the December 10th. There's no percentage on that number. I just think the report needs some work to clarify how those findings were made, and it's lacking.
I see Commissioner Ward has raised his hand now. Okay, and Commissioner Dow.
And I'm sorry, Heidi, I just found the table. According to Jeff, the December 10th recyclability screening survey from the Google Drive, polypropylene with the Vertec corrections is at 75%. So this is the problem with. I'll enter that into the report, and it's at 75%, and then we can explain why it's not on the list. So.
And that's
can I just add to this? We've talked about this many, many times, and I think polypropylene is just an example today that could happen with another material tomorrow. So it's just a point of where do we cut it off? How soft a landing do we give people? How much time do we give them to ramp up when they're that close? And I think no matter what we come up with today, they're going to have time. And I believe polypropylene, the way they're going, is going to be able to get on this list before this actually gets really implemented. And I would encourage them to work very hard to give us the information and start working to get this separated and collected so that we can save our time, because we've been going round and round with this now for months. So.
And my point is
one point of clarification, the 75 is who's got it in their acceptance bins. What's not there is, that's the spreadsheet. The RDS is who's making bales, who's making PP5 bales. That is less than 10 of 76 facilities. So that's down at less than then 15%. The 75 you see, Commissioner Davis, is who's accepting. And that's still being mixed into 3 through 7s and sent to Malaysia right now. The 70, or if we want to change it to 60%, the RDRS is this proxy number for criteria 3, which is the choke bottleneck. Is something being made into a bale and sold? That's the critical point. And Commissioner Dunleavy has suggested that you can call all the MRFs and ask them, are they making bale? Show us proof you're making the PP5 bale. It's not acceptance, it's who's making the bale, and not just sending 3 through 7s to Malaysia or Tijuana.
Yeah, well, I'll submit my comments in writing, but it's part of the confusion. We set a criteria, it meets the criteria, and no, it's not that criteria, it's some other criteria. So I think the recommendation needs to be clear, because this
we'll look forward to your comments, Commissioner.
So,
yeah, we'll look forward to your comments, Commissioner Davis, but we're getting really close to the wire on the July report. This is one of our major tasks. And I'm going to continue to put this at the top of the agenda for the meetings until we get this done, because this is absolutely critical to our success as a commission. And I see a few thumbs up and nods. So thank you all for this very healthy discussion. And please get your input to Commissioner Dunleavy so that we can wrap this thing up, have another full discussion. But we're going to keep this at the top of the list on the policy discussions until we get it done to make sure we deliver this very important deliverable. We don't have a lot of time. We'd originally scheduled to be done with this item by 10:55, and I think we're going to go a little over, and I'm going to let it because we've got so many policies, and we're not clearly going to get to them all today. But I would like to move on to, we'll hear this next in the next two weeks, Commissioner Dunleavy. So we'll look forward to any more updates on this. Thank you again so much for your hard work. So we'll go to L1 by Commissioners Sky and Dell, because this is another one that's been brought up multiple times in front of the Commission. I don't know who would like to speak to this policy. Commissioner Dell, Commissioner Sky?
I can go through it quickly.
This is the labeling system for products and post-consumer management.
And if Commissioner Ward would be so kind as to pull it up on the screen. So this is another one that we have reviewed before, and I want to thank especially Commissioner Davis, who had really good constructive comments. We took this back to the committee level, made some really good improvements to it. What I would suggest is maybe we scroll down to the proposal itself, and we'll go through really the key labels that we want this policy to cover. Right there, perfect. So essentially, again, going back to our earlier discussion about the intent of this is to make it clear for the average consumer to know, first of all, what they're buying, and secondly, what to do with that material at the end of its life. Do I put it in one of the curbside bins? Do I take it to some other collection system? And we put hazardous as our first priority because that is very important for us to prevent those hazardous items, so that's 1A, from being placed in the curbside bin. That's a danger to the environment. It's a direct impact on the recoverability of items that are placed at curbside for recycling or for organic waste collection. Second is compostable. We have a great policy on what is compostable, and this is intended to now say a clear label for those items that truly are compostable in California at curbside. Same thing with recyclable. We had a very great discussion of that. I'm excited to see we have legislation to protect that chasing arrow symbol and other recyclable labels for those items that truly are recyclable, because we owe it to our consumers to be clear about what really is recyclable at curbside. We had a discussion about precautionary principle. Again, if there are hazards, and we had a great discussion about the precautionary principle and how to reduce potential harm to our community. That information should be disclosed on labels. We have a good policy on reusable, and we want to encourage, especially at the point of purchase, we want to allow people to make purchasing decisions based on whether something is reusable or refillable or repairable. So those are the next 3 items. And then if you scroll down to the end, So the last is private take-back programs, what's now sometimes labeled with store drop-off or return to X. We certainly want to encourage that because there are certain items, and film plastic is a good example. You can ask any MRF operator and they will beg you to keep those film plastics out of the recycling bin. It is a big problem for them, but there is an opportunity to have that brought back to a store, for example, separately collected, keep it from gumming up the machinery at material recovery facilities, but still recover it. And there's a lot of other products, especially hazardous materials, where we want to encourage people to take them to a particular drop-off program. As producer responsibility is expanded, there'll be more and more of those programs. And then other products we might want to label as trash only or landfill only so that don't contaminate either the organic or recyclable streams, but those are optional. And then the second sections of the policy are talking about the other policies on how we determine compostable and recyclable acceptance lists. So it's really mostly pointing to those. And then the third component is on the curbside bins, we want to replicate those clear labels for what is compostable, recyclable, or trash only. So any questions on this policy? I don't see any.
Commissioner Landis.
Okay, go ahead.
Just a really minor point. I'm not sure we need to call it California compostable, California recyclable. I think it's using the term recyclable, compostable, period. And I don't think many people make stuff just for California. Most things are made for California are made for at least for the entire West Coast, if not the country. So I feel like you should only be allowed to use the word compostable if you meet the criteria for compostability. I don't think it's California compostable. And we've seen that with we have a prohibition on the use of the term biodegradable, and so some people market their products as biodegradable except in California. And I would hate to see somebody say compostable except in California and think that they're in compliance with this.
That's a good point. We'll make that change.
Right. And Commissioner Ward?
My understanding is the Organics Committee talked about compostability standards, and that the standards that were going to work for California were more stringent than what is used by most packagers as what they call compostable, because it meets other definitions that essentially don't work for California facilities. So I do think that's an important distinction. I am a little concerned about, and I just need to investigate a little bit more about the potential for misuse of labeling regarding refillable and reusable. Obviously, a lot of plastic products are very durable, and my concern being that the plastics packaging onslaught that we continue to see will be transformed into things claiming that they're infinitely reusable, even though they have no. So just expressing that as a general concern, I need to dive down a little bit more in those definitions.
Okay, I just want to point out this has been brought up many, many times at committee level starting in August of last year, and this is the third time the full commission has heard it. I'm going to recommend, since if I'm not seeing a whole lot of edits to this, that if we could pull this up, make the minor changes that we're just discussed, and we actually vote on this, it would be the first reading. And then we would have it for the second reading at the next meeting, and we could actually add it to the report. Is that something you're open to, Commissioner Skyndall? Thumbs up. Okay. So if we could pull that up, I just want to make sure it's clear what amendments we just made. I think they're very minor. Commissioner Ward, I think you had that. Is that okay? And Commissioner Dell, did you want to say something?
Yeah, to Commissioner Ward's point about the definition of reusables, we basically put a placeholder in there because to reference a separate policy, because this is something that has been, I think a two-person team was taking this on, and it's a big issue and it's complicated. So there is a current definition around reusable food service packaging, but we've just basically got a placeholder that references what needs to be a separate policy. And I believe, Commissioner Ward, were you and Commissioner Schneider tasked with actually developing that?
Yes, and it's something that needs more attention.
Okay, so you've asked about it, and we've got a placeholder for it, and we can pass this with the placeholder. And then when you two push that other one forward, then it'll reference that gets approved.
And that's
Actually,
the intent with this policy
on the-
overall. It's pointing to those other policies that actually define these terms.
Commissioner Lapis and I did have a proposal on the refillables today as well that we were going to take up next. So that might be helpful in informing this, but I think leaving it with a placeholder for now, and then we can vote on it, or just referencing any other definition of refillable might be the way to go. And that's really a key point there. And then we could do that later, another place.
Hey, Chair Sanborn, and just a quick question on the refillable. At the end of the useful life of a refillable, is that refillable going to be recyclable? I mean, is that right? So it goes through its phases of returning, reusing, returning, reusing. I would imagine at some point it has to be turned into a complete different product. Right. So would that be is that a condition within that? Just a quick question.
Well, maybe I don't know if we'll have to go back and look. Did we write it as a condition? I think that's an excellent point though. So we should look at that when we bring that item up. My hope would certainly be that they are. Okay. So I'm sorry, what was the other edit we were looking at on this?
To delete California from California compostable and California recyclable.
And that's pretty minor. So that wherever there's California in front of recyclable or compostable, that would be removed. Is there anybody that has an issue with that or is not okay with that? Okay, I don't see any.
Through the chair.
Commissioner Schneider, did you want to say something?
I'm trying to think back of our last labeling meeting. Didn't we want California? And I'm going blank on why we had this discussion. And the reference was how California bottle bill or bottles have California 5 cents, 10 cents, Michigan, blah, 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 blah. It lists all the other states. And I can't for the life of me remember why we felt California was important. It was at our last labeling meeting.
I did add some language
about
that.
Toyota can answer it.
It did come up. There's a labeling policy running through Oregon right now, and they had the same. There were the comments that they got on that were companies who were saying, we can't just label this for Oregon because we sell the entire coast. But the issue that the rebuttal to that was that, well, Oregon may have a different recycling list than California. What is actually recycling there may very well be different than the list in California. And so we felt that we left it in. We're going to get that rebuttal. We're going to get arguments about that. If we take it out, we're going to get arguments about, well, what about Oregon's list versus, no matter what, I think that this is going to be something that's going to be highly commented on if it gets picked up and starts moving through the legislature. Leaving it in my opinion, or leaving it out is going to have the same amount of conversation from those who are going to have to label it. And I'm not taking a stand either way because I don't think that either way, there's good argument on both sides.
I did add some language to the background of this policy regarding that issue. But ultimately, part of the discussion was that California is a large enough market that it makes sense for us to drive some of the discussions about what is labeled. And we often do set the trends for the rest of the country.
I don't see any other hands, but I can say I think that's true, but I get nervous about being that specific with, international companies selling into the United States. So I'd be more comfortable taking it out if that's okay. It seems like there's either on the fence. Yeah.
I think this also came back when we were discussing recycled content, and is it California materials going into a package with recycled content, or is it out of state or out of country? So I think the message was to the international manufacturers, be it packaging or product, heck yeah, we are the 5th largest economy in the world. We want you to respect what California needs, and this is the time to take the stand on it. So I guess I would argue to keep California in. I hear what Commissioner Toyota says. We're going to get comments either way. Let's put our line in the sand and address the comments as they come in.
Okay. So then it's...
If I could raise my concern again, here's my worry. And somebody actually made a comment. I don't remember who made this comment, but somebody said, you know, well, for California compostable, it's going to be a stricter standard than the rest of the country. And I think that's true. And I think I would hate for somebody to then read it and say, okay, in order to use the word California compostable, we have to meet these standards. Otherwise, we can only call ourselves compostable. And then we have both products on the shelves. And people thinking it's a higher standard for the term California compostable, but you're still allowed to say compostable. And I think that's incredibly confusing. That's my concern, that it could still lead to a lot of greenwashing.
I actually agree with Commissioner Lapis. We do discuss it elsewhere in the policy, but in terms of the actual label, it really should just be compostable or recyclable, not California compostable or California recyclable. It's clearer for the consumer. So if there's no objections, I'll just make that change consistently in terms of the actual label.
Anybody who's opposed to that? Removing California. Sounded like Commissioner Schneider was, are you okay with that? And just letting it go, and then we'll see the comments that we get?
Yeah, I'm okay. I just, I want us to be proud. We're putting our mark in the sand. So let's not chicken down just too soon yet. It's going to get watered down as it goes through the process anyway.
More just advisory.
But yeah, I'm okay. I'm okay. It's a team effort. I'm cool.
Very good. Then do I hear a motion to move this item with the amendments we just discussed, the 2 minor edits?
I make one more suggestion. This came up on the reusable. Could we also, in the next version, maybe for reusable and refillable, just cite that it could be a concern and it has been misused, and so standards should be developed? To add some narrative on that, maybe. As opposed to literally saying insert, you know, placeholder, or insert other language here.
If it's okay, I would be happy to offer that language as part of the background information to express that concern.
So we don't have that language in front of us, so we can't vote on that. So what I would suggest then is that this come back as the final for the first reading, and hopefully a very quick vote at the next meeting, and then the second reading at the second meeting in May, so we can add it to the report. Does that seem fair, reasonable? Okay, very good. Thumbs up. So that's how we'll handle it. We will not vote on this today because that was added language we do not have in front of us, and we decided we would not vote on it unless we all had the language in front of us. Commissioner Sky, Commissioner Dell, are you okay with that? And hopefully we can get a vote next meeting? Great. Okay. Thank you very much. So we are running over. I'm going to suggest we take a quick 5-minute break. I know this is kind of torture, only 5 minutes, Commissioner Osterger, but we'll try to come back, get one more quick policy done, and then we'll go into the other items that I think we can do quickly, hopefully. So everybody, will see you literally at 11:15. Thank you so much. And remember, turn your cameras and mic off. Thank you. Okay, commissioners, let's see if we can come back and do one more policy. We are not going to get, unfortunately, to all the policies we had in front of us today. I knew this would probably happen, but let's try to tick up, if it's okay with you, an item on sustainable circular economics, correcting market imbalances of counterproductive incentives, which has been before the commission in February. And this is primarily authored by Commissioners Sky and Ward. If you could go ahead and quickly see if we can do this in no longer than 10 minutes, that would be great. And it looks like we do have one public comment on, it says this proposal, but I don't know which proposal that is, Ben. So if you go ahead, if it was on the last proposal, maybe?
No, it's on this upcoming one that you just mentioned.
Oh, okay. Very good. Go right ahead.
So the comment is from Gail Bryce at XT Green. It says, policy on correcting market imbalances of counterproductive incentives. Thank you for the excellent work on this important policy, including requesting a joint assembly and Senate resolution to the California federal delegation in favor of eliminating counterproductive incentives and implementing incentives for circular economics. This is a timely manner as eliminating fossil fuel subsidies is included in the White House American Jobs Infrastructure and Climate Action Plan. However, not included in the plan's $1 trillion budget is the expansion of the U.S. recycling infrastructure, even though recycling has an enormous potential to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. This is a glaring omission as recovered plastics reduce the need for virgin plastic materials from fossil fuels. The Clean Futures Act does include recycling, but it focuses on regulations with minimal funding. Therefore, the Commission may want to consider adding recycling to the American Jobs Plan in its resolution to the federal delegation.
Thank you. And I did want to let everybody know too, I did get a text from Commissioner Ferrante, and she had something come up today she could not miss. So that's why she is not here. And I also got a text from Commissioner Kalpakoff that he had to drop off at 11. So I believe, have lost him for the rest of the meeting. Commissioner Sky and Ward, did you want to speak to this item at all?
Sure. Commissioner Ward, let me know if you want me to just go through the editor, if you prefer to do that.
Go ahead and lead the discussion, please.
Sure. So I'll just highlight the edits that were made based on the discussion we had at the last presentation. If you scroll through, those are in red, and we should be able to go through those very quickly. Mainly, we wanted to bolster this particular policy by providing more references. So you'll see more information here, for example, about the particular subsidies for oil and gas. And just cutting to the chase, what we're seeing primarily is subsidies for fossil fuel production having a significant impact on plastics production, because that is directly tied. And so we wanted to have more specific references about the size of the industry, the subsidies that they're getting, and how that affects plastic production. You'll see that here, and how that affects not just production, but emissions of all types. So that's what you're seeing on the screen right now. Let's scroll down further. This is, again, additional information about the potential impact on human health. We wanted to link to specific sources on that. And I appreciate we got some information from other commissioners on this. Go ahead and scroll down. And then the proposal itself, there was discussion about the applicability of EPR and wanting to have a broader approach to addressing plastics and packaging. And so we listed some examples. For example, Senate Bill 54, which was initially introduced in 2020 and reintroduced this year, as well as the Federal Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act. But again, those are just examples. We're really talking about a comprehensive program that would establish clear chain of command and extended responsibility for producers to achieve source reduction, reuse, recycling, and diversion rates, and then to upgrade and expand existing infrastructure. We made some other minor changes to the proposal to include a proportionate reduction in incentives for virgin plastic production. I think that was based on comments from Commissioner Davis, And then as we heard from public comments, we added a fourth recommendation to encourage our federal delegation to address this issue at the federal level.
Commissioner Sky, can you just go back just a little bit? Because I was reading to the section regarding EPR.
Yes, I think that was section
just for a second. Just for a second.
And I do believe there is a bill in the in Congress now that is going to remove the subsidies for oil and gas, which were quite large, many billions of dollars still, that I heard in a hearing yesterday on this issue on getting to for addressing climate change. So I believe that that's in big discussion right now already at the federal level.
Well, for me, Commissioner Sky, would be if we reference Senate Bill 54, I would say Senate Bill 54 as amended by multiple stakeholders. I don't think that I could support the wording there similar to Senate Bill 54, or I would be willing to look at language that says such as bills relating to EPR, in legislature. Because I mean, I although I worked on Senate Bill 54, there's a lot of differences by the industry regarding what should have been in the bill and red lines regarding it. So I don't feel comfortable saying such as or something similar to Senate Bill 54.
I agree with that. We want to be a long-term document as well.
Okay.
And years out, but that might not make sense to people.
It references the years, but I'm comfortable with adding as amended by multiple stakeholders in the parentheses.
I think that's a little vague, and ultimately we did not agree with Alex. So I don't think there is an agreement on a version of SB 54 among the committee members. So we could just strike, just a thought, strike from such to 2021. Establish a comprehensive program for single-use plastics and packaging, which would require these products to be recyclable, compostable, period. And then not list specific bills.
I would support that.
And I would change it require instead of required.
Okay, I think we need to make further edits then for the rest of that sentence if we delete the other examples.
Yeah. Program for single, let's see, establish comprehensive program.
Maybe we can just delete what's highlighted with and that is.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
It's a bit of a long sentence, but I think it captures the comments that commissioners had last time.
You have three ands in there, which probably it makes it even harder to read.
Establish a comprehensive program for single-use plastics and packaging, which would require these products to be recyclable and compostable, and that establish a clear chain of command and extended responsibility. It's a very long sentence.
So let's change the recyclable and compostable to recyclable or compostable, just for readability. So I think that still keeps the meaning. Mm-hmm. And then the next and could probably just be a comma.
Yeah, delete right after compostable. I think you can delete and.
Yeah, I think.
Compostable, that.
And I think you need to space out
clear chain of command.
maybe with a clear chain of command. Although I'm actually not even totally sure what that means now that I think about it.
I don't know what that means either.
Yeah, I don't know what that means either. Maybe you could take that and just say, and just start with extended responsibility for producers to achieve, or something, with a component of extended responsibility for producers to achieve.
I'm sorry, I'm getting confused.
We're at time and we're really close. So what I'm going to suggest is that this is very close. It looks like all the changes could be accepted. And then this one paragraph just be slightly tweaked to address. And then this would be one of the other policies that we could literally adopt for the first time as a whole policy that's gone through already 2 times at the commission for the next meeting pretty quickly, if everybody's okay with that. So Kobe, you can go back and...
I think, Chairman Sanborn, as long as I get a chance to take a look at that paragraph, once it's read.
We should all. Yes, absolutely. In fact, what I would recommend is that this get changed pretty quickly, and we could do the same thing we did with the last one and just uploaded it to Google so that everybody can see anybody's comments. And then that way it's kind of all hashed out before we get to the next meeting, so we can have the third time be the first reading that's final. Okay, does that work, Commissioner Sky?
Yeah, so Commissioner Ward, if you send me this version, I'll clean up that paragraph so it reads correctly. I'll probably slice that into a couple of sentences, and then I'll repost it.
Excellent.
And you can do it without any track changes and just do it as final, and then everybody can just have any final last comments before the next meeting. Thank you so much. So you, great job. We got through at least one more. So we didn't get through 3 of our policies today. We did not get through producer responsibility for market development, the policy that had not been taken up yet, even though we've discussed it many times, on refillables by myself and Commissioner Lapis. So I definitely want to bring that up since that's in play in the legislature. And then supporting and expanding reuse and repair by Ward and CPSC. So we will, but we're going to take up the ones first every time that we've already taken up to make sure we start getting things off our plate before we add new things to our plate, because we have so much that we need to finish. Thank you so much. Great job. With that, I would like to pull things out of order. Since we don't have Mindy waiting, we're going to do the legislative stuff ourselves, and we really need to get to this charter, and we're at 11:30. So what I'm going to suggest is we move to agenda item number 7, update to the commission charter. Hopefully it won't take 20 minutes, but who knows? And then we'll get back to the legislation piece, because we've not gotten approval yet from CalRecycle, a hard yes that we can do that anyway, and I want to talk about that. So if that's okay with you, we'll go ahead with agenda item number 7. And this item came up based on a public comment last month, or at the last meeting. And you asked the chair and vice chair to come up with some language to update the charter and refresh it a little bit. And so Commissioner Vice Chair Valle came up with some language, and I'll turn it over to him.
Thank you, Chair Sanborn. Ted or Chair, can you bring up the language that we're proposing for the charter, please?
We'll do that.
Commissioner Ward, do you have it?
Yes, I do. Will in
Thank
just a moment. There we go.
So if you can just scroll down a little bit. Thank you. Good. So one of the more important issues that we have as commissioners is our responsibility as public officials. Although because of COVID, our ability to talk amongst one another, to meet together informally or formally, has been really restricted. And I really believe that if we were meeting, for example, in Los Angeles, Sacramento, or Ukiah, we would hate traveling because we'd have to shoulder those burdens and the travel time ourselves. And that would really be inhibiting to us. But meeting virtually has its limitations. And one of those are that we can't get together collectively or meet over lunch or breakfast before or after meetings to talk about our roles as public officials. And we never really had that conversation as a group, except when we were being briefed at the very beginning and the mandates that we were confined to based on the legislation that we were given. Without COVID, that limits our ability to cross-communicate. And for example, when we identify ourselves as members of the commission, it's critical that we identify ourselves as public officials. And so 11.1 is that whenever we're meeting or conferring with jurisdictions within the state of California, within our business area, or as private citizens, we have to remember that we are commissioners and all of us have an obligation to be careful about how we use our titles when interacting or interfacing with people outside of the commission. So these two suggestions are in the spirit of trying to put everybody's ethics on the front end and sustaining our credibility as a statewide commission so that there's no misperception by anyone that we interact with about our intentions. So we have to be very careful that we always keep in mind, as an elected official, I'm always being told by the General Counsel of Alameda County that I am a County Board of Supervisor 24/7. So if I'm off on vacation in Napa or at Disneyland, I'm still a county supervisor. And everything that I say and do is on the record. So I have to be very critical and mindful of that. So as commissioners, we also have to be mindful of those distinctions. So we're offering these two items in addition to our charter so that people do not misperceive or misinterpret our intentions, and that we also critically look at ourselves and check ourselves as either a private citizen, a public official, or somebody doing business. But above all, we're always going to be perceived as commissioners of the state on this recycling commission, especially if we use that threshold to talk with people, hold conversations with people. So we have to be, again, very mindful. So we're offering these two sentences as part of our charter so we can sort of self-critique, self-check, and make sure that we stay within the parameters of our responsibility, which is a reflection of the entire commission, not just of you, but the entire commission. So these are conversations that we could do, for example, at lunch in Sacramento or at breakfast in Sacramento, for those of us who work in the public sector, who work as elected officials, versus those of us who are not in those positions. It helps to share these kinds of examples, and there's many I can tell you about. But because we don't have that advantage due to COVID, it's important that these conversations take place. And in response to the letter from Long Beach, I want to say that that's simply a key to open the door for us to have a conversation. And it should not be used as leverage against anyone or anything that's happened, but simply an opportunity to learn from those kinds of critiques from a jurisdiction that, in my opinion, is doing something very special that I'd like to hear more about somewhere down the line, as well as Stockton, with regard to what they're doing in recycling. So offer these two items as points of discussion and acceptance into our charter in the spirit of maintaining and sustaining our integrity and credibility
Thank you, Vice Chair, and I really want to thank you for bringing this language to the commission. And we've got a couple of comments from commissioners, so I think we'll start with Commissioner Schneider.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, it was Commissioner Ward, wasn't it? It was Ward and then Schneider.
Yes, thank you.
Sorry, go ahead.
Real quickly on the first one, my main issue is that I don't think we should ever individually imply that we're inappropriately representing the commission. I don't think there's a problem identifying ourselves as part of the commission, but the problem is you don't want to act like you're somehow carrying the opinions of the commission all by yourself. So I would use the word representing rather than not identifying themselves as, so on 11.1, I would suggest not identifying themselves as representing the commission. And on the second one, I actually think disclosure of being a member on the commission prior to engaging in business discussions is entirely appropriate. Just that you want to disclose that in a way that it reflects the limitations of those discussions, either during those discussions or moving forward. And that's what I would suggest.
Okay, so changing that 11.1 to not identifying themselves as representing the commission when conducting business on behalf of their employer or other furtherance of their personal business interests. That's what you wanted there? Vice Chair, is that what you intended with that language?
Yeah, that's the spirit of what's in the language, yes.
Is there a way to track that change?
Yeah, I'll see if I can do that.
Great, and I think we had Commissioner Schneider.
Commissioner Chair Sanborn, were you calling on me? I couldn't hear you. Okay. As an elected official, for example, my being on this commission is listed on every council agenda, but I tend to take off one hat or the other depending on where I am. So for example, if I'm just a resident in Millbrae commenting as I did at a planning commission meeting on Monday about deconstruction in full demolitions of projects, I have to be careful of making clear what hat I'm wearing. So I don't have a problem with 1.1, but in 11.1, on 11.2, anytime recycling is coming up or it's other things, I am stating I'm a member of the commission and I'm here to listen. And I don't want to have to ask the full commission, for example, before I go to the Sierra Club or NICRA's meeting last Friday on how to fund food recovery. I shouldn't have to come back and ask the commission in advance. I just say I'm a member of the commission and I'm here to listen, and please comment. Please send me your comments. Would 11.2 preclude me from being able to do that? I did that twice last week, a Sierra Club meeting and a NICRA meeting, again, on how to fund food discard recovery.
That's a good point. I think that we can work on the language in 11.2 so it's not prohibitive. It's clearly, for example, whenever I go in front of a city council as a resident of the town where I live, I have to say right up front, I'm here as a resident and speaking only as a resident, so I preface my comments and couch them within that context.
Yep.
Maybe there's another way to say this.
That's exactly what I was thinking, because we all, I think as electeds, we all do that. We make sure that we're very clear when we speak which hat we're wearing at that moment, and who we're speaking on behalf of, even though we might be a member of a commission or this or that. And I think that's, maybe we change this language to be a little bit more focused on clear identification on whom you're speaking on behalf of, because I do worry that this might be too limiting if we're out. We're just trying to gather information and encourage people to give the information to the commission. And I don't want to be prohibited from doing that without getting the blessing. I mean, to me, the blessing of the full commission is we go out and get that information, but we're not asking for data unless the commission has said, yes, you're a two-person committee or you're a committee that's going out to get that information and clearly identify yourselves as such, sort of thing.
Through the chair, would it be okay? I mean, often I think when we're out in public, we're listening. You know, we're sitting there, so we're representing, but listening is actually a big part of the job of an elected official or a representative of a body is listening. So adding the word listening might give us that freedom, Supervisor Valle, that we want.
Sure. And what would you propose to put
I'm looking.
that word? Instead of engaged? Listening or engaged in?
Well, engaged then would say, so for example, when I was at the Sierra Club, I said, well, if you've got this opinion, share it with the commission. So we are engaging them. We are soliciting them to provide comments, especially in writing, because it helps with all 17 of us if we get it in writing as opposed to me reporting back. I would just engaged and or listening. Again, I'm not usually a big wordsmither.
Yeah.
I'm almost wondering if we just need to take this one and kind of reword it to be more about.
Yeah, I think so. I think the intent here, Commissioners, is that some of us, like myself, are engaged in the business of recycling. So, you know, I negotiate with buyers of commodities, you know, I talk to other people versus some of you that are not in the business of recycling, but work in recycling. There's a distinct difference here. For those of us that are in the business of transactions, that was the intent of 11.2.
So maybe we could try reframing this as instead of saying not identifying themselves, but the commissioners are responsible to clearly identify who they are representing when out in public or in doing interactions. Because as we said, it's really it's a 24/7 job. So we just have to all be cautious to make sure it's very clear which hat we're wearing when we're interacting with people. We can say we're members of the commission, we could say our job, but exactly at this particular moment in time, this is the hat I'm wearing. Maybe that would be more clear. So disclosing themselves as members of the commission when engagement.
I think Commissioner Ward is trying to get there.
Okay, while he's doing that, thank you, Commissioner Ward. Commissioner Davis?
Yeah, I was also struggling with the second item, and so I've been trying to grab language out of Begley-Keene that might be adopted, so I can share a couple of things that I found in Begley-Keene. I'll send those to Commissioner Valle, I guess, who may be updating it, see if we can modify that. I mean, there's a prohibition clearly in serial meetings, but there's language that allows communication to a legislative body, for example, to answer questions, provide information, so long as you're not communicating the intent of the commission. So I'll send some language along.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. And then Commissioner Sky?
Thank you. The reason that we're revisiting our charter is because of the complaint that was submitted. And I saw two issues that were raised in that complaint. One is a concern about what I would characterize as maybe unprofessional behavior. And the other is a concern about a potential conflict of interest. And both of those really have the potential for undermining the work of the commission. And so I'm really glad that we're bringing up these changes. I have two specific recommendations, and I'll just read the wording. So Commissioner Ward, tell me if I'm going too fast. One is to add a section 11.3, and it would read, be mindful when conducting business on behalf of the commission to avoid the perception of a conflict of interest and recuse themselves when appropriate to avoid such perception. And then I would suggest a section 12. And that's really to allow us to address complaints that come in. And that would read, complaints regarding an action by a commissioner can be brought to the commission for discussion and possible sanction. Sanction by majority vote can include written censure or a request to CalRecycle to remove a commissioner. And that would obviously be for very serious complaints.
Sanction and possible.
Maybe
We already have a number 12, so would we be moving 12 to 13?
Yes. It was for discussion and possible sanction.
And we'll just leave those up while other people comment. Is there anything else you wanted to say on that?
You had another sentence about the process.
Yeah, sanction by majority vote can include written censure or a request to CalRecycle to remove a commissioner. Thank you, Commissioner Ward.
Okay, we're running out of time, so I'm going to go down to the next speaker, Commissioner Dell, and then Commissioner Dunleavy.
Right. I share your concerns about freedom of speech issues because as an activist NGO who works to stop greenwashing, we employ social media and other legitimate freedom of speech pathways to question and criticize things, not as a commissioner. And so I think for that last edition of an action, I would like, if we're going to add that, I'd like to have that delineated of what such actions would be. Is this an unethical behavior? For example, if we found out that a MRF or a representative of a MRF on this commission was exporting against the Basel Waste Amendments or doing something like that, would that count? I mean, I think this really opens a can of worms of what qualifies. I absolutely support the conflicts of interest additions. And yeah, that absolutely should be in there. And I think we also have to recognize that we're not all elected public officials. So the addendums that were added here originally were fine, but then talking about as if I'm an elected mayor or a county supervisor of Alameda, I'm not, right? And others on this committee aren't either. So what applies to you doesn't apply to me. I would like to also add conversations with the media, because I'm constantly called by reporters and they say, oh, you're on the commission. What do you think? And I say, I will not talk as a commissioner. You can look in the public domain. You can look on the Google Drive. I can tell you what's been posted in the public domain, but I will not talk as a media representative. And also I would add, so I'd add media conversations in here as well. And then speaking engagements as well. Are any of us being selected for speaking engagements because we're a commissioner? And then are we really representing the commission, or are we representing our own group's interests, right? So maybe before we speak as commissioners on engagements, we should get group approval of that as well. Thank you.
I think those are really excellent points. And I think we've talked about that a bit before, about if we're going to go out and speak on behalf of the commission, we try to let everybody know that we're going to do that, and that we only relay the facts of what this whole commission as a group has already factually approved or is in public discussion about. That's all we agreed. That's my memory, and that's how I've been operating. And I see a thumbs up from Kobe, so hopefully everybody's still on the same page with that. So those are excellent points that I think we could delineate maybe in this language. And again, we've got literally 9 minutes, so we're gonna have to move on. Commissioner Don Levy.
Yes, thank you. And I guess just chiming in with what other people have said. In my position, one of the largest recyclers in Northern California, I do get calls from media, and they do bring up that they've seen me on the commission, and I clearly say, yes, I'm on the commission, but I am not speaking on behalf of the commission or any opinions for the commission. Strictly speaking, on behalf of my position with Ming's Resources or Ming's Recycling, just to get that out there, because whether it's bottle bill issues or recyclable material issues, we do get called quite often. So I do make those disclosures up front. So we need to have that leeway.
And I think Commissioner Skype's addition 11.3 is clear and succinct. I like the intent there. Again, being mindful of who we are and what we do. This is a guideline. That's all it is.
And Commissioner Lapis, and then Commissioner Schneider and Osagura.
I think that's all great. My only question is on 11.3. Folks are on this commission representing businesses, and I don't think we necessarily want people to recuse themselves when there's a conflict of interest, because we want the interests of those businesses to be represented. That's the whole point of having private business and local government representatives on the commission. Meaning, I want Jeff to reflect things that are, to support markets for products that would benefit him or Alex or Richard or anybody, because that's the whole point. And I think having to recuse yourself because it benefits you would really make it really hard for any of the industry folks to vote on anything. So I'm not sure if recusal, maybe there could be some form of disclosure as opposed to recusal.
If I recall, we did discuss this before, where we knew that everybody was on this commission was going to have a conflict at some point in time, but that's why we were asked to be on this commission. So the point was, I think, that if we knew there was clearly some connection to what we do day by day, we just simply, we're identified as who we represent anyway. So it's clear who we work for. But, I'm open to ideas on that, but I that's one thought I had as well, Commissioner Lapis.
I just feel like there could be a perception of conflict, and I'm not sure that's a bad thing. If somebody says, oh, this is helping recycling markets is really going to help waste management, that's a conflict. Even if they have that perception, that's the reason why Alex is on the committee. He's just the middle of my screen, so I'm picking on him.
No, but Nick, that's a great comment, because I would have to recuse myself from basically most of the things we talk about. Okay.
Yeah.
I would have to recuse myself from everything.
So this is why we're talking about this, to make sure we don't have unintended consequences. So Commissioner Schneider and then Osagura, and then we're going to have to wrap up because we're 5 minutes out. Commissioner Schneider?
Can I just clarify real quick while she's coming on? I think Commissioner Ward captured it very well. I was specific to when we've empowered commissioners to conduct business on behalf of the commission, because I think when we're in these public meetings, our roles are very clear, the conversations are very clear, and I don't think it's an issue then. I think it's when we're going out in two-person committees or even out doing work on behalf of the agency that we work for that we might have those potential conflicts, and we wanted to just be clear in those situations.
Good clarification. Commissioner Schneider?
I was just going to say, I agree with the term disclose. In my world, that's ex parte communication. Although for many of you, almost all of your conversations outside of your company would fall under that. I'm a little bit concerned about the last one, 12, when it talks about perceived unethical action, because that's very broad on that. And I'm not sure all of us have had the training that might go along with it. For example, elected officials, we have to go through the FPPC ethical training, and it tries to help us see where we might inadvertently step into a pathway we don't want to go down. But the commissioners haven't had that advantage. And even still, it's really easy to make a mistake that's entirely unintended. So and given how nasty the country has gotten in pointing fingers at people, I would hate to lose someone because they are representing an industry, which is why they are here, but somebody doesn't like that, so they accuse them of being unethical.
Okay. I'm sorry.
It just makes me really uncomfortable.
Excellent point. And Commissioner Oseguera, and keep it short, please.
I'll give up my time. We should pay very close attention to the disclose or recuse, because you might end up eliminating everyone on the commission to make any comments ever. So
that would certainly be an unintended consequence.
Yes. So I would say that's it.
Okay. Through Chair, Commissioner Davis was going to bring out some language. I'd like to work with Commissioner Ward and Davis to bring back some final language at the next meeting.
I agree. Is there anybody that has any issue with that? Excellent discussion. Thank you very much. We're going to skip item 6 on update and review of legislation. The spreadsheet is on the website, so you can see all the bills. We did not get official approval from CalRecycle that we can. Apparently, this kind of opened a can of worms for their discussion about other groups that they work with, and do they have the same authority, and did we get explicit authority in the last piece of legislation? So we could certainly do a quick vote if we wanted to in the last minute, but probably not a good idea. So I think we'll just wait another 2 weeks to take that up and then in the meantime, everybody can weigh in on the bills, as at least we're tracking it publicly. So excellent job today. We did not plan on having any more presentations on the commission until we get all of our policies done and the report done. They can all be done in the committee meetings. And so the summary is we're going to bring back a couple of those items to approve, hopefully, in first reading next meeting, and hear a few more. Please try to get your policies and anything you want the commission to look at done by the Friday before the next commission meeting, so everybody has time to read it. And with that, we are literally 30 seconds out. They will cut us off. So I will say thank you for great work. 21st meeting is done. Thanks again. Have a great couple of weeks. See you soon.
Happy Earth Day.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, I guess not.
Oh, sorry, Commissioner